Hello, Genesis Dad here, and today I'm going to be talking about if buying a house is a good or bad investment. So when you buy a house, there's definitely a lot of things to consider. One thing to consider is how long you're going to live at this house. Another thing to consider is the cost of the house. And another thing to consider is the interest on the house. Lastly, minimal things to consider are, is this community in an HOA? What's the HOA cost? What type of property taxes are on this house? These are other costs that are involved that can add up between your interest, your principal, your HOAs, your property taxes, if you have CDD fees. So just because a house is affordable doesn't mean there's not other costs involved. Other communities also have membership fees that charge you to play golf or anything like that, whether you play or not. So you have to be careful where you're looking at houses. Now, interest rates, something very important, and that's what we'll talk about first. Interest rates can always change, either higher or lower. An interest rate is based off of the economy and how the house market is going, and that's what justifies an interest rate. So if you buy a house and interest rates are 2%, versus 6% or 8%, your payments will be much less at 2% than 6% or 8%. So interest rates are very important. It's better to buy when interest rates are low, but usually if interest rates are lower, that means the house market's higher and vice versa. However, things happen where there's inflation and where houses are cheaper. In 2019, houses were very cheap. In 2020, houses were still pretty cheap. COVID happened, and eventually inflation happened and houses almost doubled in price for a little bit. Maybe not doubled, but about 1.5 times the price. So a house that was $400,000 was $600,000, maybe even more, maybe closer to $700,000. So that's when the COVID first happened, interest rates were still low and houses were still cheap. Then house prices went up and interest rates were still a little bit low. Then interest rates went high up, and then houses were still high. So you had high cost of houses plus high interest rates. So that's very important to consider, is the market, interest rates. And now let's talk about house pricing. To me, you shouldn't pay more than $100,000 a square foot. However, it's all about location, where you decide to live versus the house value. So my house that I'm buying is a $600,000 house for 3,000 square feet. Now, realistically, I could have got a 3,000 square foot house for 500,000, but I wanted to build the house exactly the way I wanted it. So that being said, that's why it came out to 600,000. Now, if you go to California, and in most areas in California, you bought a 3,000 square foot house, you would be paying well over $1 million, $1.25 million right now. So that's the difference if you want to live in California versus living in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Also, if you buy used houses, you can probably save a bit more money versus buying a brand new house that comes with a warranty. So other things to talk about is, how long are you going to live at this house? Because when you buy a house, there's other costs that are involved, such as closing costs. When you purchase a house, your closing cost on a $600,000 house is almost $30,000 in closing costs. So that can add up very, very fast and add a lot to your costs. Then when you sell the house, you also have closing costs, not as much, but then you also have to pay usually 3% to each of your real estate agents, the one that's selling your house and the one that's buying your house. So when you do purchase a house, you don't pay any realtors, but when you sell your house, you pay both realtors, the person's realtor who's buying your house and the realtor that's selling your house. So that could be 6%, plus you have that amount that I told you for your closing costs. So realistically, you will lose a lot of money if you buy and sell a house really close in time. Also, about the first 10 years of your mortgage, because an average mortgage is 30 years, right? So if you pay your first 10 years, it's primarily paying interest. Let's talk about that interest again. So let's say you bought a house for $600,000 and you put $100,000 down and you're borrowing $500,000. In 30 years, you would pay $500,000 on interest on top of the $500,000 that you already owe. That being said, you're losing $500,000 plus all the money you put into the house, whether it's through damages or updating or from hurricanes, whatever. That's also cost involved. So yes, you might say my house might go up $500,000 in 30 years, but you're not making anything because you spent that money in interest. So now you say, well, how do I avoid spending so much money on interest? Either one, you can change your payments to do a 15-year mortgage. You can pay off as much as you want as early as you want, and that would save you interest payments. Or there's other ways to pay like payment and a half, and that'll save you a few $100,000 in interest as well. So there's definitely different ways. When you get a mortgage, it has to say no prepayment penalty, which means you won't be penalized for paying more of your mortgage, which you can do it at any time from your computer. Now, I don't know what it's going to be like when you buy a house, because this video is for you usually when you're older, but it'll give you advice towards buying a house. Other things to factor in, like I said, location is know your neighbors, know the house, know the layout, know that it's a house that you can grow into with your family. I know I made a video about this previously, but is buying a house a good investment or a bad investment? Most of the time, it's a bad investment. Now, it's also a place that you need and a sanctuary and a home to give you comfort, so it's also very important. So it's not that important to have a very expensive home. It's important to have a home that you feel comfortable in, whether it's the nicest lavish style home or not. If you can afford it, you can afford it, and if you can't, you can't. Getting a mortgage is not something easily done. So when you buy a house, normally your payment has to be a quarter or a third of what you make. So if your mortgage payment's $3,000 a month, they expect you to make $9,000 a month. That's not easy. So keep that in mind. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you ever have any questions about housing or investments or money or anything like that, please let me know, and I got you, and I'll see you in the next one. Love you.